I forgot my hearing aid and turned back. Then I heard my daughter say, "Tonight we end this." I wasn't supposed to hear it. If I had remembered my hearing aid that morning, I would have driven straight to the pharmacy and back like any other Thursday. I would have never turned the car around. I would have never stood outside my own kitchen window, frozen, while my daughter's voice slipped through the cracked glass and said, almost calmly, "Tonight we end this." Those 4 words didn't just echo. They lodged somewhere deep in my chest and refused to move. My name is Armin. I'm 63 years old, a widower for almost 5 years now. My hearing hasn't been reliable since my early 40s, but I've managed. You adapt, you read lips, you nod when you miss a word and hope it wasn't important. That morning, I left home without my hearing aid. I didn't realize until I was halfway down the street. The world felt muffled, cotton-stuffed, distant. I could have ignored it. I usually do. But something nudged me to turn back. A small, ordinary decision. The kind that divides your life into before and after. My daughter, Sana, moved back in with me last year. She said it was temporary. A reset, she called it. After her divorce, she needed space. Needed familiarity. Needed someone who didn't ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. I didn't hesitate. Sana has always been my world. After my wife passed away, it was just the 2 of us. She would sit beside me in the evenings, her head on my shoulder, watching old dramas her mother loved. She'd laugh at my terrible attempts to cook biryani. She'd remind me to take my blood pressure medicine. "You're not allowed to leave me too," she once said softly, her fingers tightening around mine. There was something fragile in her then. Something I thought I understood. So when she asked to move back home, I opened the door before she finished the sentence. The first few months felt good. Lively. The house wasn't silent anymore. Her perfume lingered in the hallway. Her shoes lay scattered near the door. She worked from home, took calls in her room, sometimes late into the night. I never complained. If she was rebuilding her life, the least I could do was give her quiet. But small things began to shift. Subtle, almost invisible. She started lowering her voice when I entered a room during her calls. Smiling, but with tight lips. Locking her bedroom door more often. I told myself that privacy wasn't secrecy. That adults are allowed their own corners of silence. Still, sometimes, I would see her watching me. Not lovingly, not even thoughtfully, just observing, as if measuring something. The morning I forgot my hearing aid, she was in the kitchen when I left. "Going out?" she asked. "Yes." "Pharmacy," I replied, raising my voice slightly. She nodded but didn't look at me. Her eyes were on her phone. Her thumb moved quickly across the screen. "Don't wait for lunch," she added. It was a strange thing to say. I rarely did. I brushed it off. When I turned the car around to retrieve my hearing aid, I didn't plan on being quiet. I didn't expect anything unusual. I simply didn't want to spend the day guessing at conversations. The front door was locked. That surprised me. Sana almost never locked it during the day. I didn't want to ring the bell and startle her if she was on a work call, so I walked around to the side of the house. There's a narrow path that leads to the kitchen window. It doesn't fully close. The latch broke years ago. My wife used to complain about it. As I approached, I heard voices. Muffled. My hearing without the aid is inconsistent. Low tones carry better than sharp ones. And Sana's voice, I know it anywhere. She wasn't on a work call. Her tone was different. Not professional. Not gentle. Firm. Cold. "He won't suspect anything," she said. I stopped walking. My first instinct wasn't fear. It was confusion. I leaned slightly closer to the window. There was another voice, male, I think. Deep. Calm. I couldn't make out the words clearly, only the rhythm. Sana exhaled sharply. "I know. I've been patient. But tonight we end this." The air felt thin. My brain tried to rearrange the sentence into something harmless. A show she was watching. A metaphor. A dramatic joke. But her voice didn't sound playful. It sounded decided. There's a particular silence that follows a sentence like that. Heavy. Conclusive. I felt it through the glass. My heart began to beat in a way that reminded me of hospital corridors. I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself. "She still doesn't know," she continued. "And he trusts me completely. He trusts me." My throat went dry. The male voice responded, softer this time. I couldn't hear the words. Only the reassurance in the tone. Then Sana laughed. Not her warm, childhood laugh. Something restrained. almost relieved. I'll handle it, she said. After dinner. He won't see it coming. My stomach twisted. He won't see it coming. The words circled like vultures. I told myself I was mishearing. That without my hearing aid, the mind fills in blanks with its worst fears. That I was standing outside my own house, spying on my own daughter like a stranger. But why was the door locked? Why was she whispering? Why did my name, or what sounded like my name, drift faintly through the glass? After everything he gave me, I stepped back, the gravel shifted under my shoe, and I froze. Inside, the voices paused. Silence. Footsteps approached. I moved quickly, quietly, back along the side path and around to the front of the house. My heart pounded so loudly I could almost hear it clearly, even without the aid. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Sana stood there. Her expression was smooth, composed, but her eyes searched my face longer than usual. Abu, you forgot something. Her voice was perfectly normal. I forced a small smile. My hearing aid, I said. Oh, she replied, you should really keep it in the car. You know how forgetful you're getting. Forgetful. The word stung more than it should have. She stepped aside to let me in. I noticed her phone was no longer in her hand. Were you on a call? I asked casually. Yes, she said immediately. Too immediately. Work stuff. Boring. I nodded. As I walked past her toward my bedroom, I caught a faint scent, not her perfume. Something unfamiliar. Masculine. Or maybe I imagined it. Inside my room, I closed the door softly and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were trembling. Trust is a strange thing. It builds slowly, brick by brick. Years of bedtime stories, school events, hospital visits, shared grief, shared silence, and yet, in a single overheard sentence, it can fracture. Tonight we end this. What was this? Who was he? Why did it feel like I had just glimpsed the edge of something carefully hidden? I slipped the hearing aid into my ear. The world sharpened instantly. The hum of the ceiling fan. A car passing outside. The faint clink of a spoon against a cup in the kitchen. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. I walked back into the hallway. Sana was at the dining table, typing on her laptop. She looked up and smiled. Don't be late, she said gently. I made your favorite for dinner. Her tone was warm again. Loving. Perfect. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost convinced myself that I had imagined everything. Until my hearing aid picked up a soft vibration from her phone on the table. A message notification. Her eyes flickered downward. Just briefly. I didn't mean to look. But I did. And on the glowing screen, before she could tilt it away, I read 3 words that made the floor feel unsteady beneath me. Is he suspicious? Sana locked the screen instantly and met my eyes. She smiled. But this time, it didn't reach them. And I realized something terrifying. Tonight wasn't just another dinner. It was a deadline. I forgot my hearing aid and turned back. Then I heard my daughter say, tonight we end this. There's a specific kind of fear that doesn't shout. It sits quietly in your chest. It smiles back at the person across the table. It waits. I wish I could tell you I confronted her immediately. I didn't. Instead, I did what fathers do best. I protected the version of her I wanted to believe in. All afternoon, I moved through the house like a guest in my own life. Every sound felt amplified through my hearing aid. The ticking clock. The hum of the refrigerator. The soft rhythm of Sana's footsteps pacing in her room. I told myself there had to be an explanation. He won't see it coming. Is he suspicious? Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe, and this, meant something else, a project, a lease, a bad habit. Maybe I was a lonely old man filling in silence with fear. But deep down, I knew my daughter's tones. I had known them since she first learned to speak. And that tone this morning had not been loving. Dinner was ready at exactly 7. She had made my favorite, lamb karahi, just the way her mother used to. The aroma filled the house. Warm, comforting, familiar. She set the table carefully. 2 plates, 2 glasses of water, even a small bowl of sliced lemons, the way I like them. Sit, Abu, she said softly. I watched her move, controlled, focused, almost rehearsed. Long day, she asked. Not really, I replied. Quiet. She smiled faintly. I like quiet. That word again. Quiet. For 5 years after my wife passed, this house had been unbearably quiet. When Sana moved back in, the silence softened. Laughter returned in small pieces. Had I mistaken her presence for healing? Or had she mistaken my loneliness for weakness? She served the food and waited until I took the first bite. "How is it?" she asked. "Good," I said honestly. "Very good." She seemed relieved. Not proud, relieved. That detail didn't escape me. We ate mostly in silence. But not the comfortable kind. This silence felt like a thin sheet of glass between us, transparent, fragile, ready to crack. Halfway through dinner, she placed her fork down. "Abu," she began carefully, "have you ever thought about selling the house?" There it was. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a question. "I built this house," I said slowly. "With your mother. I know. You grew up here. I know." She looked at her hands. It's too big for you. Maintenance is expensive. You shouldn't have to worry about all that." "I manage," I said. "You shouldn't have to manage," she replied gently. "You should be comfortable." Comfortable. Another carefully chosen word. She reached for a folder beside her chair and placed it on the table. "I've been looking into options," she said. "Retirement communities, assisted living, nothing extreme, just support." The room felt smaller. "I don't need assistance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You forgot your hearing aid this morning," she replied quietly. The sentence wasn't cruel. It was precise. "I came back for it," I said. "Yes," she said, holding my gaze. "You did." There was something in that look. Measuring again, as if she were checking whether I had heard more than I should have. "I'm not sending you away," she continued softly. "I just think it's time for change." "Change for whom?" I asked. Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "For both of us." There it was again. "Tonight we end this." "End what?" "The house. Our arrangement. Or something deeper." "You've done so much for me," she said, her voice trembling slightly now. "Paid for my education. Helped me through the divorce. Let me come back here when I had nowhere else to go." "I'm your father," I replied. "That's not a debt." "I know," she whispered. But she didn't look relieved. She looked conflicted. After dinner, she insisted on making tea. While she was in the kitchen, I opened the folder she'd placed on the table. Property evaluations, market listings, projected sale values, and tucked inside, a document already partially filled out. Transfer authorization, my name typed neatly at the top. Her name listed as primary beneficiary. My signature line blank. My heart didn't race this time. It slowed. So this was it. Not something violent. Not something dramatic. Just a quiet erasing. Sell the house. Move the old man somewhere smaller. Simpler. Out of the way. End this. When she returned with tea, her hands were steady. "I spoke to a consultant today," she said carefully. "He said the market is strong right now." The male voice. The calm reassurance through the kitchen window. "Is he suspicious?" I lifted my cup slowly. "No," I said. She blinked. "No, I haven't thought about selling," I clarified. "Not seriously." She nodded, but disappointment flickered across her face before she could hide it. "You don't trust me?" she asked quietly. The question pierced deeper than any accusation. "I trust you," I said. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. I still did. Not fully, not blindly, but enough. She stood and walked toward the window, staring out into the darkness. "I'm not your enemy, Abu," she said softly. "I never said you were. Sometimes," she continued, her voice thinner now, "it feels like you think I'm trying to take something from you." I didn't respond, because that's exactly what it felt like. She turned back toward me, eyes glistening. "I'm trying to build something," she said. "For both of us. Stability, security. With my house," I asked gently. "With our future," she corrected. "Our future." The phrasing was subtle, shared, justifiable. And yet, that message, "Is he suspicious?" I placed my cup down carefully. "Sana," I said, choosing my words with care, "if there's something you want to tell me plainly." Her breath caught. For a second, just a second, I thought she would. Her lips parted, her eyes softened, and then, her phone vibrated again on the counter behind her. She didn't look at it. But I did, and through the reflection in the darkened window, I saw the screen light up. One message, 3 words, "It has to be tonight." Her shoulders stiffened. She turned slowly back toward me. "Abu," she said, almost pleading now, "you know I love you, right?" The question wasn't reassurance. It was preparation. The air between us shifted. Something was about to be said. Something final. She stepped closer to the table. Closer to me. And for the first time since she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms, her voice trembled when she spoke. "Please," she whispered, "just sign the papers. And in that fragile, breathless silence, I finally understood. Tonight wasn't about dinner. It wasn't about property. It was about choosing whether I still believed in my daughter, or whether I was ready to accept that the person standing in front of me was no longer the child I raised.